Hi, everyone, and welcome to Resource Revolution, the resource management podcast. I'm your host, Christine Robinson, and on this podcast, we will discuss the real-life experiences of people in and around the world of resource management. Today, we have Sarah Maynard joining us. Sarah is a passionate resource management leader with the foundation of her career rooted in human resources. Sarah has spent her entire career within professional services with a primary focus in resource management. She is based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, where she has lived most of her life. She has an adventurous husband, 2 very busy children, and a 6-pound pup that likes to follow her around everywhere. When Sarah is not out solving resource management challenges, she's enjoying the outdoors, playing tennis, the beach, and watching her kids' sporting activities. Sarah, it's so great to have you here today. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Christine. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here and honored that you asked me to join your podcast today. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're excited to get into the details of all things resource management related and hear a little bit about your career path. So it's interesting. It's always interesting for me when I talk with someone who's in resource management because it is so rare to find someone who actually has experience in this space. And so I'm curious, how did you actually get started in resource management in the first place?
That's a great question. I fell into resource management really by way of human resources. I started my career with a small engineering consulting organization and then moved to a management boutique consulting organization where resource management rolled up under the HR umbrella. So I was able to dabble in a number of different areas within talent management, but resource management is really where I spent the bulk of my time with that company. And I really just found that I loved it. It really allowed me to stay very people focused, but also the ability to impact the bottom line. So really very fast paced in nature, something I kind of thrive in, a lot of pressure, a lot of challenges. And so for whatever reason, I found that I loved it and continued my career down that path.
That's awesome. And I love what you said about the fast-paced nature of resource management, something that I also very much enjoy. And it's interesting because sometimes people will shy away from it because of that, but other times wonder, is that really the case? Is it really fast-paced? Is it really that high pressure being an internal kind of a function? And so I'm curious your perspective, Sarah, on is that something that you have found to be consistent throughout your career, that it is operating kind of at that pace and at that level?
I would say yes. I think it's only probably even gotten more dynamic as the function in general has evolved. And, it definitely was intimidating to me initially. I have to say I was a little, hesitant about embarking within resource management. I kind of saw some colleagues experiencing that area in that space, but I also really wanted to dabble and see how I liked it. Right. So, for me, it built a lot of other skills that I didn't really know that I had and just abilities. You really encounter a lot of challenging internal customers. I would say difficult internal customers at times. So, I think being able to develop and build that thick skin for one, and build those relationships and overcome those barriers was a huge benefit from actually moving into the resource management field. I think there's a lot of pressure to solve problems. Resource managers are problem solvers. That's what we do every day, day in and day out. I love that. I love being able to put the puzzle pieces together. You also have to be prepared to roll with it if, something starts to crumble, because there's usually one domino, that is pulled. And then you, of course, have the domino effect of everything potentially collapsing as a result. So I think, being that we're so tied to the bottom line and the revenue and the profit of the organization, that pressure only continues to increase. And really depending on the size of the organization, the size of the deal that you're working for that organization, depending, on a number of different factors. But I don't see it getting less pressure. I think I just see as an individual in that field developing better skills to work through those challenges and those barriers. And that just comes with time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. And it's also so true that the RM profession is unique in the sense that it does get to blend that people side with that real operational bottom line connection to what the organization, whatever, it's almost industry agnostic, right? Whatever is trying to be achieved is truthfully achieved through the people and the talent that is brought into the organization and effectively aligned and deployed throughout the course of the year. And maybe it's project based, maybe it's a little bit more cyclical in terms of the work. It's still part of that. So I'm curious then, as you started really in the HR space, that is one thing I certainly have run into in my own career and in my personal life, of kind of trying to explain what resource management is, because a lot of times people don't know, or they're not necessarily familiar with the term, and they're like, oh, that's HR, you do hiring, right? So how do you is that something that you run into?
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting you say it that way, because even, several years ago, my children were much younger. They asked me what I do. Like, Mom, you're on the phone all day. You're you're constantly on calls and trying to figure things out. And so I think from a very basic kind of explanation, it's putting together teams to implement solutions for customers, right? And so, ultimately that is, from a pure strategic resource management branding perspective, it's putting together the right project team. I'll say project team, not just resource, because I feel like it really is a mix of resources on a project to be successful, but the right project team, for the right project and roles at the right time, and making sure that that's all aligned. So, so it's just providing solutions for your internal customers to then be able to roll out, obviously, to our external customers is the best way, I think, to put it. You mentioned, kind of going back to the HR side of it, it is very people centric. I mean, your people, your resources in a professional services organization are your assets, right? This is your product. This is what you're billing on this billable headcount. You've got to take care of these individuals, make sure they're rewarded, make sure they're challenged, make sure they're developed. So much of that goes in with resource management, which really ties so much to human resources, which is why I'm still continue to stay so engaged with it. The ability to shape careers, help, individuals understand what that next opportunity looks like, what's available, what is out there from a demand perspective. Do they want to cross train in a new skill set? Maybe look at promotion and going into that next leadership role. So there's a lot of that resource management really helps in collaboration, right, with the direct management team. But there's a lot of that goes, hand in hand with resource management's partnership with the business.
Absolutely. And you reminded me of a funny story that I think I'm sure you would appreciate and others would as well. So it's always, I always have a bit of envy, I would say, when I'm with people and they ask what they do, and it's a job that everyone knows. And I'm sitting here trying to explain what it is that I do. And I'm like, no, it really is a real thing. And, this is what it is. And I find myself telling a little story about, what it is that I do to kind of help them understand what my field is. And a couple of years ago, I was actually in a taxi, and the gentleman who was driving me from, it was some business trip. I think I was getting back from maybe somewhere. I think I was supporting the Southeast region in the US at the time. And he was very kind and took an interest in kind of chatting with me and wanted to understand what I did. And it was comical, because the more that I tried to explain it, the less he understood about what I did. And I'm trying to tell, and he goes, oh, so you do recruiting, no, I'm not really a recruiter. And he's like, okay, so, oh, you're in HR and you do that. And I'm like, well, not really, but I work with them. And finally we're talking about this for about 15 minutes. And he goes, I figured it out. I know what you do. And I'm like, you do? Are you sure? And he's like, you're a dispatcher. And I'm like,
interesting.
Yes. I am a dispatcher. That's exactly right. So it was like he finally got it, because I kind of explained like start to finish what it is that I do and how I know who's available and where they are and where they should go, and what their challenges are and what they don't want to do, and maybe certain areas that they don't want to work in, and things of that nature. So it was great. So for a while I was introducing myself as a dispatcher for some time. So I thought you'd enjoy that. Yeah. But the other thing that's interesting too, I think, Sarah, about your experience is there are varied entry ways and pathways into resource management. That's what I found. There isn't, you don't necessarily see people, graduating from university with their degree in resource management and then pursuing a really defined career path. So it's more of a winding road, so to speak, in terms of how people have found themselves in this profession and certainly navigated within then that field. And I think you're a great example of that. One of the things that is also sort of happening on the periphery of that is, what is that distinction between resource management and HR? Is it really that different? What are the areas where HR and resource management kind of play in the same spaces? And I guess I imagine I have a sense of what your answer will be here, but my question is resource management the friend and ally of HR? Is it the enemy of HR? How does resource management interact with HR?
No, I think and it really depends on the organization, but I think, in terms of size and the relationship that already may exist within those two different business functions, in some cases it does roll up under human resources. So obviously it's part of that. I have seen it more under the operations umbrella in my more recent experiences. And it's kind of one of those things too, depending on the size of the organization, it kind of bobbles from different groups. I've seen it roll up under delivery, human resources where I started, and then most recently ops I've seen in a lot of companies, which I think probably makes the most sense. And I think the reason I feel that way is that, because resource management as a function within an organization has evolved so much to be more of a strategic business partner, the operations function is truly that. It is a business partner with delivery in a professional services organization. They're guiding, they're advising, they're providing metrics, they're helping, analyze, key data to be able to make those recommendations for the business. And that's where resource management really comes into play. As it relates to human resources, there are certainly pieces that cross over, as we talked about, the performance management piece of that, the professional development piece of it. From a career development perspective, a lot of performance management outcomes, whether it's a, review or project review or annual review, things of that nature, can actually be tools to be used in resourcing. So where is this individual, exceeding? Where do they need to continue to develop? Okay, let's give them this opportunity on this next engagement to be able to do that. So there should be more of an alliance. There should not be a us versus them mentality when it comes to really resource management in any other part of the business. It should really be an alliance with all different functions within the organization. And I think human resources can rely on resourcing and vice versa to be able to continue to develop individuals and and hopefully retain those individuals. I mean, it's a pretty big expense, to have to continue to hire and retrain, resources. And then that obviously is an ultimately results in, the success of your external customers, right? So they want continuity on their projects. They don't want to have to keep replacing individuals on projects that maybe are leaving your organization because they're not happy. So it's really important to, care and feed your resources. So human resources and resource management can work hand in hand to accomplish that.
I couldn't agree more. And I have absolutely found within my own experience in supporting and overseeing an RM process across different industries, different geographies, that has been true in my own career. I have found that working really hand in hand and being in lockstep with whoever the HR business partner is, right? It can only be helpful in really not only information sharing, but providing a much better service internally to start to finish looking at the life cycle of the employee experience, and whether that is the part of HR that might deal with bringing people into the firm. And again, we are making as an organization promises, right, that we're wanting to then deliver on when people have joined us, right, about what type of career experience they're going to have and the types of work they're going to get to see and types of clients maybe that they'll be able to get to experience. And so having that direct connection with even recruiting and resource management, I would say at the front end is huge. part of that is, yes, there's the whole skill set conversation, and are we hiring for the right experiences and sets of expertise that are going to align with where the work is going to be. Maybe it's a consulting practice, maybe it's a totally different field, but regardless, having that connection is key. And I love what you said then too about really managing the kind of that employee engagement tie-in, and the ability to retain talent is huge, right? Because at the end of the day, what people are working on and who they're working with and their connectivity to the team that they're a part of is hugely impactful, right, on their career experience. So I think you're so right there. Is that something that you knew going into this? Is there anything about that surprised you, kind of coming into then developing your career within resource management? Did you know exactly what to expect, and it all kind of worked out exactly that way?
Well, I think I had a little bit of an advantage starting in human resources, right? So where resource management was part of that organization, and I wasn't necessarily working under resource management, but within HR. So I could see the connection already, and kind of understanding the overlap and understanding the care and feeding that really was necessary to retaining that employee engagement and that talent. I would see I had a colleague that I witnessed, do very well in the profession, and just the relationships he had and were just awesome. So, to me, I saw the ups and downs or I should say the pros and cons of being in that profession. There's a lot of pressure there. So I was able to witness it, but I also jumped in knowing it. So it's kind of one of those things where I felt like I just took a leap of faith and knew that it was the right profession and opportunity for me with my personality. It's interesting when you talk about recruiting too. Recruiting and resource management so directly connected, for one, not only within an organization, because you're obviously sourcing internally as you're resourcing, externally as you're recruiting. What do we need externally that we don't have internally? So that direct tie-in with recruiting is huge. But in my careers, I've hired and built and developed resource management teams. Recruiters are fantastic candidates for resource management roles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're building relationships, you are getting to know individuals, you're helping understand, you're sourcing and you're looking for the right skills for different projects within the organization. And you have those soft skills. The personality to me is the hardest thing to find, the right person that's, unique for a resource management role. You can teach technology, you can teach a, tactical skill. But you can't really teach, a personality and just character. And that's hard to find. So, I've hired people that have had recruiting backgrounds. I've hired people that have had really no relevant background to resourcing, but have the right personality, the ability to build those relationships. And you can tell that when you're speaking with individuals on the front end.
Let's talk more about that, because this is now officially a theme within our podcast. So we had a conversation recently around that idea of what makes a good resource manager, and how can you, what do we boil that down into, right? Like, what are those characteristics that indicate, hey, this person might be a good fit, even though, and in very many cases, I would say perhaps they haven't had that background. Maybe they haven't been a resource manager for 10 years, but there's something about them that is that transferable skill set that leads you to think, hey, this is going to be a good thing. Can you tell us more about that? What are you looking for, and what are those qualities?
And yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it starts with just the ability to, and you can pick this up from an interview, right? To have a conversation, build a relationship, a natural discussion, right? So I think, people want to be able to talk to you as their resource manager. So when you think about what's necessary in building those relationships, you need to have those soft interpersonal skills that can foster that. You're not only building relationships with your business partners, but you're building relationships with the resources that you're resourcing. And often, I mean, you should be, and resource management should be an advocate for the resources, right? So I kind of look at it as you're kind of the those, I don't want to say psychologists, that they tell everything to, but resources don't often tell and confide everything into their direct managers for whatever reason. There could be different reasons for that. But as a resource manager for, the resources that you support, you should be able to have that open dialogue and relationship. So it's really key to be approachable, to have interpersonal skills, to be agile, to be able to just let things, it's not going to be it's not black and white. Resource management is very gray. So, you've got to be able to let things go when the perfect plan doesn't come to fruition because something else came in at the 11th hour and disrupted that. You've got to be able to be agile enough to just let that go and move on to plan B or plan C or whatever it may be. So I think, as I'm interviewing and building a team, I really do look for, does this person seem like they can, develop relationships, have those meaningful conversations, build that trusted relationship with the business, be able to let things go and be agile enough to be able to kind of work through different scenarios. If you can do that, I think you're going to be successful. It's hard though, when you're looking for opportunities, because you really have to get in there to talk to people. And if you don't have resource management on your resume right now, it's becoming a highly sought after function, right? I'm seeing it all over job boards. When I started, gosh, I won't even age myself, however many years ago, it wasn't even on a job board. It wasn't in a salary survey.
Yeah.
People didn't really know about it. And you're kind of talking about that. It seems like it's becoming the flavor, of the day, of the month, of the year. How well that's embraced in an organization is another story. Some people think they want resource management, leaders think that, but do they really know what they're asking for? Are they asking for more tactical support? Are they really looking for a strategic business partner? And in my more recent experience, it started out very tactical, right? So they wanted to roll out a global RMO. They only had what existed by way of acquisition at the time, but there was an appetite enough to want to take this full scale across the global organization. And it started out, in the infancy stage, it's very tactical, administrative, enough to, let's learn the business, let's build the team, let's learn the business, develop a tool, develop some processes and to enforce compliance. But with time, those relationships were built. The trust was built, the ability to be more empowered to make staffing decisions, getting to know the business, getting to know the subject matter. And that takes time. I mean, I tell people all the time, it takes a good couple of years for somebody to really be able to support the business in the most efficient and strategic way.
Absolutely. That is such great advice and perspective. And really, you touched upon something that is happening within the profession around people are starting to get to the point where they're seeing that this is a thing as a job to pursue. And I have certainly noticed that myself. Even in the last couple of years, it's been night and day in terms of the growth that as a field RM has experienced. And at the same time, it's kind of exciting to see that happening, but also the evolution of there are certainly places where it's very much in its infancy. And as you're describing, it's almost like an experiment, right? Some organizations are starting this and they're like, hey, we think this is going to be great. And here's how we want to do it, right? What does this mean here? And in a lot of ways that I do think attracts the exact personality that you described of someone who is wanting to be part of that journey and excited by that and willing to do those types of things. The other thing that you said that was really, really helpful is this idea of what are those qualities that it takes to be successful? Because as you mature in your own life cycle as a resource manager, likely you're not doing the same thing that you did years ago, and you're wanting to take on more responsibility, be more strategic, and understand all of that. And so I'm curious from your perspective, some things that stuck out to me around being agile and being willing to kind of shake it off and, hey, this didn't work out, no problem, go, let's go to the next. And also alongside that, and perhaps in many cases with that, this idea of having a thick skin, is that something that So I will say a non-negotiable is, without question, that is a huge success factor in being able to be a resource manager. So that, not questioning that, the question that I have is that something that you are just born with? Is that something that develops over time? And how can maybe more junior resource managers think about developing those qualities?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it certainly developed over time with experience, not just experience in resource management necessarily, but just professional experience in general, right? It's interesting, and I think I kind of mentioned this or alluded to it earlier on in our conversation, but I kind of wonder where I would be if I'd never really gotten into resource management, because it really challenged me to have some very difficult conversations with some very high level executive individuals. And so, being able to do that and having to do that and initially being a little, hesitant about doing that developed me into the person that in the professional that I am today. So it takes time. I wouldn't say, you're born with it. I mean, I think there are people that seem to be, more sensitive than others. So there may be part of that that's just innate. But you probably wouldn't be going for this type of position if you didn't kind of think you might want it and could do it, which is certainly where I was. I mean, the first conversation I ever had with somebody, and I always laugh about this today. I talked to my old VP of HR about it not too long ago, but I had somebody, an executive, kind of letting me have it a little bit over the phone, and I had to put him on pause and run and get my colleague who I just joined the team with. And he came back and just really basically calmed this individual down and said, "Come on now, what's the problem?" Just that was because of his relationship, right? The relationship building skills. So you learn from others, for one. I think having a really good mentor and someone that supports you and has your back is huge. I'm a believer as a leader to really build credibility within my team. So, for me, it's important and for myself as well, that, I want to build my own credibility, but also for those that, if something's coming to me that should really be addressed by someone that's on my team, allowing them to develop those skills to be able to solve for that, whatever that situation may be. And that just comes with, some experience, but the more that they're able to build that credibility, that's going to create and further develop those relationships. So I just think it takes time. I think, you kind of want it, and then, you kind of want to do this for one, but then once you get going, you can really have any conversation. I really feel like I could probably talk to pretty much anybody at this point, just given the different conversations, right? I'm sure
I hear you. Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because as I hear you say that, first of all, that's great advice, just right off the bat. And the other thing that I love about that is the linkage that you made between that ability to be nimble and kind of let things just roll off your back, so to speak, but also linking that to the relationship part, because it's so true what you said. They're not two separate things. They go together. You are able to do that much more effectively when you have established a good relationship. And I think that is something that doesn't probably get enough press in resource management. Is I've certainly found myself in a position as an RM leader, it really having to strongly encourage, more junior people to really get out there and establish those relationships. And I think at times I have even struggled to articulate the why, right? Because again, sometimes some personality styles will just lead you to being that way to begin with. And so it comes naturally to you. And so you don't really need to be convinced to establish a relationship, because you're doing that anyway. But having that foundation, it makes it a lot more smooth of an experience when, not if, but when you then have to have that difficult conversation or that challenging situation that you're navigating, because that's what RM is all about. There are peak times and we are struggling to make the resourcing plan work, and something's got to give. And being able to explain that in a way that is logical, that is also empathetic, and is also firm, is an important part. And it's difficult to navigate, and you don't really get trained on that, do you? That's not really that's not part of it.
That's right. Yeah, it takes time. And to your point, I mean, the relationship is key to that and being successful in that regard. I think you know, the understanding of the value of what resource management brings to the table is also key in that. So, resource management, resource managers, being a resource manager, it can be a very thankless job, right? I mean, you're kind of thrown to the wolves to solve the problem. And if you don't have the answer, somehow it seems like it's on you. But this is I always say resource management is a organizational function. We just get the title. It's an end-to-end process. It starts in the pre-sales sales cycle all the way through project staffing and successful rollout implementation, or whatever the solution may be for the customer. So we just are the problem solvers and trying to figure out and make sure that we've got the right team in the right place. But there's a lot of things that are out of our control. So we often get the backlash. We're that person. So having that thick skin that you build over time, but also understanding at the end of the day, you're doing the best you can. It's a job. It's your career, but it is a job, and you're doing what you can to solve that problem. And being able to separate the two, I think, is important at times. And I've told my team that in the past when they take a lot of this on their shoulders, is try to separate yourself just a little bit from that. You're doing a fantastic job. This individual is not happy with the solution, and we understand why. But there's often several competing interests for the same person, the same resources, and not everybody's going to get the best solution. There will be a solution. We will not leave you without something, but is it going to be, the preferred? And somebody's going to win out on that. So you have to be the messenger, and that's not always easy.
Yeah. That is so right. And that expression, for anyone listening, of don't shoot the messenger. A lot of times resource managers are the messenger, right? And so, and I would say arguably most of the time resource management is the messenger, and that's part of the job, and rolling with the punches of that has to be part of something that you find gratifying in order to enjoy the role. In my opinion, that is what I have found. I have also spent my career really focused in this space, and I believe that the parts of the role that are challenging, and there are some that are very challenging, are also the same things that are very rewarding, right? When they work out in certain ways. And it's interesting to hear you talk through that, because I have to imagine, I know for me, I have translated a lot of these skills into my personal life. Have you seen that as well?
Yes. Yes, I think I'm a walking calendar for one. My husband's like, how did you date is on a Friday? I'm like, because I just do. Yep. It'll be 3 months from now and I know what date that is. But yes, I mean, for sure. I mean, we're problem solvers, right? We have to figure out solutions, and how do we prioritize? I mean, prioritization is huge, right? And your day is never the same in resource management. You never know what you may have your day completely planned, and something comes in and just rocks that and changes it completely. So I think personally that happens a lot, especially with children and all the things that go along with that. So yeah, I think there's a huge, relationship between how resource management skills lend to your personal and your professional.
Absolutely. So see, everyone, if you go into a career in RM, it's got multiple benefits. It's tenfold how it pays off. Sarah, it has been awesome talking with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Really, I know I gained a lot. I really enjoyed the conversation. And with that, we'll wrap up our conversation. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to hear more episodes. And until next time, stay tuned for more RM discussions. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine.